They told you she died for love. They told you the Queen of Egypt pressed a snake to her breast and closed her eyes, thinking of Mark Antony. They told you it was romantic, tragic, beautiful. They put Elizabeth Taylor in a golden dress and let her whisper her lover's name as the venom took hold. They gave you poetry. They gave you passion. They gave you a love story wrapped in silk and sealed with a serpent's kiss. They lied. The real story of Cleopatra's final days has nothing to do with love, nothing to do with snakes, nothing to do with the romantic tragedy Hollywood has been selling for decades. The real story is about something far darker, something the powerful have always preferred to keep hidden. Because the real story reveals exactly how empires break their enemies, not with swords, not with armies, not with the quick mercy of battle, but with something slower, something more deliberate, something designed to destroy a person from the inside out before allowing them to die. Cleopatra did not choose death because her heart was broken. She chose death because a 23-year-old man named Octavian spent 10 days engineering her psychological destruction, 10 days using her children as weapons against her, 10 days measuring her body for the cage he was building, 10 days offering false hope and calculated cruelty in precise alternation until the most powerful woman in the ancient world had only one choice left: the manner of her dying. That choice, the last one she would ever make, is what this story is really about. Not romance, not legend, not the exotic mystery of ancient Egypt. Just a mother, a queen, and the machine that was built to break her. Think about what you know about Cleopatra. The seductress, the temptress, the dangerous woman from the East who corrupted good Roman men with her foreign wiles. That version of Cleopatra was created by the same man who destroyed her. Octavian didn't just want to defeat the Queen of Egypt. He wanted to control how history remembered her. He wanted to transform a brilliant political leader into a cautionary tale about female ambition. And for 2,000 years it worked. The movies show her death as a choice made in grief, a heartbroken woman following her lover into the darkness. But grief doesn't explain the 10 days. Grief doesn't explain why Octavian kept her alive when killing her would have been simpler. Grief doesn't explain the architects with their measuring ropes, or the messages about her children, or the careful, systematic pressure applied hour after hour, day after day. Something else was happening in that sealed room in Alexandria. Something that powerful people have never wanted you to understand. Because if you understood it, you might recognize it. You might see the same techniques used today. You might realize that the machinery of psychological destruction didn't disappear with the Roman Empire. It just got better at hiding itself. Cleopatra was 39 years old when the trap closed around her. She had ruled Egypt for 22 years. She had survived assassination attempts, palace coups, civil wars, and the fall of 2 Roman lovers. She spoke 9 languages. She was the first Ptolemaic ruler to actually learn Egyptian. She had looked Julius Caesar in the eye and made him fall in love with her. She had done the same with Mark Antony. She had played the game of empires better than almost anyone alive. And none of it mattered, because Octavian had found her weakness. The one thing she could not sacrifice. The one thing she would betray herself to protect. Her children. 4 of them. Caesarion, 17, the son of Julius Caesar himself. The twins, Alexander and Selene, just 10 years old. And little Ptolemy, barely 6. They were scattered somewhere in the palace, held by Roman guards, their fates hanging on their mother's cooperation. That is where the real story begins. Not with a snake, not with a broken heart, but with a mother who would do anything to save her children, and an emperor who knew exactly how to use that love against her. The next 10 days would test every limit of human endurance. They would reveal what happens when absolute power meets absolute love. They would show how far a mother will go and how far an empire will push. And in the end, they would prove something that Octavian never wanted anyone to know. That even when you control everything else, you cannot control how someone chooses to die. The death scene you've seen in movies, the peaceful queen on her golden couch, the loyal handmaidens weeping softly, the gentle fade to black. Forget all of it. What actually happened was far more brutal, far more calculated, and far more human than any legend could capture. This is the story they didn't want you to hear. The story of how Rome broke its enemies. The story of a mother's impossible choice. The story of 10 days that changed history. And it starts with blood on the walls of a tomb. Octavian spent 2,000 years controlling Cleopatra's story. He turned a political genius into a romantic cliché. If you're tired of powerful people rewriting history to suit their agenda, hit the subscribe button as we revealed historical truth. Only those who prefer comfortable lies over uncomfortable truth would scroll past. But you, I know you want to hear the truth with it filtered, so subscribe to our channel, because today we are demanding justice for Cleopatra through our story. The screaming started before dawn. Cleopatra heard it from inside her tomb. A man's voice, ragged with pain, calling her name across the courtyard. She knew that voice better than her own heartbeat. Mark Antony, the father of 3 of her children, the man who had gambled an empire on her love. He was dying somewhere outside, and she could not open the door. She pressed her palms against the cold stone and listened. The tomb she had built for herself rose 2 stories high near the temple of Isis. Solid limestone walls, massive wooden doors barred from inside, no windows on the ground level. She had designed it as a final fortress, a place where her body would rest for eternity, surrounded by the treasures she had gathered, protected from grave robbers and enemies alike. Now it had become her prison, and Antony was bleeding to death just beyond the walls. Iris gripped her arm in the darkness. Her handmaiden's fingers were trembling. "My queen, we cannot stay here. The Romans are coming." "I know. If we open the doors, we die, or worse." Cleopatra pulled away from the stone. Her mind was racing through options, discarding each one. Open the doors and Octavian's soldiers would pour in. Stay sealed inside, and Antony would die alone in the dirt. Neither choice led anywhere good. Both choices led to endings she could not accept. Charmian's voice came from the upper level. "My queen, there may be another way." Cleopatra climbed the interior stairs, her bare feet silent on the stone. The upper level had a single opening, a window barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. It looked out over the courtyard where Antony's men were gathered around something on the ground. A body, still moving, still calling her name. "Ropes," Cleopatra said. "We pull him up." The physics were almost impossible. Antony was a large man, heavily muscled, wearing armor. He had fallen on his own sword after hearing a false report that Cleopatra was already dead. The wound in his stomach was mortal. He had perhaps an hour left, maybe less. But Cleopatra had not survived 22 years on the throne by accepting impossible odds. They worked in desperate silence. Iris and Charmian fed rope through the window, while Cleopatra directed Antony's men below. They fashioned a crude harness, wrapped it under his arms, and began to pull. The rope bit into their palms. Their muscles screamed with effort. Antony groaned each time his body scraped against the limestone wall, leaving dark smears of blood on the white stone. Halfway up, the rope slipped. Antony dropped 3 feet before they caught him again. Cleopatra felt something tear in her shoulder but did not let go. She could hear Roman horns in the distance now. Octavian's advance guard, maybe 10 minutes away. If they didn't get Antony inside before the soldiers arrived, everything was lost. They pulled harder. The rope burned through the wooden beam they were using as a fulcrum. Antony's weight seemed to double with every inch gained. But inch by inch, heartbeat by heartbeat, they hauled him upward. His blood ran down the wall in thin red streams, marking their progress like a terrible clock. Finally, his hand grasped the windowsill. Cleopatra grabbed his arm and pulled with everything she had left. His body tumbled through the opening, crashing onto the stone floor in a heap of blood and armor and failing breath. She fell beside him, cradled his head in her lap. His eyes were glassy, struggling to focus. But when they found her face, something like peace moved through them. "You're alive," he whispered. "I'm alive. They told me you were dead, that you had killed yourself. I couldn't." He coughed. Blood bubbled at the corner of his mouth. "I couldn't live in a world where you didn't exist." She wanted to scream at him, wanted to ask who had lied and why he had believed it, wanted to demand how he could have been so foolish, so reckless, so willing to throw away his life on a rumor. But there was no time for anger. There was only time for goodbye. "Don't cry for me," Antony said. His voice was fading. "I was the greatest of Romans, defeated only by another Roman. That is not a shameful way to die. Stay with me." "I can't." His hand found hers, squeezed weakly. "The children. Promise me. Whatever happens, keep them safe. I promise. Swear it." "I swear." His chest rose once more, held, then released in a long, slow exhale that seemed to empty the room of air. His eyes stayed open, fixed on her face, but the light behind them had gone. Mark Antony, triumvir of Rome, lover of Cleopatra, father of kings, was dead. The sound that came from Cleopatra's throat was not grief. It was something older, something that came from the same place inside her that had survived palace coups and assassination attempts and the murder of her siblings. A sound that said, "This is not over. This will never be over. I will make them pay for what they have taken from me." But before she could even begin to plan, the pounding started on the doors below. "Open in the name of Caesar." The Romans had arrived. Antony died because someone lied to him. Someone wanted him out of the way. Manipulation and deception destroyed him before any sword could. If you believe truth matters more than convenient lies, hit subscribe. Manipulators and deceivers won't. The voice outside the door was calm, almost friendly. "Your Majesty, my name is Proculeius. I come on behalf of Gaius Octavian Caesar. He wishes to discuss terms." Cleopatra stood at the top of the stairs, looking down at the barred entrance. Antony's blood was still drying on her dress. Her hands were raw from the ropes. Her shoulder throbbed where something had torn during the pulling. But her mind was clear. Clearer than it had been in months. "Terms," she repeated. "What terms does Caesar offer?" "He wishes to guarantee your safety and the safety of your children. He has no desire for unnecessary bloodshed. Egypt has suffered enough." The words sounded reasonable. That was what made them dangerous. Cleopatra had negotiated with Romans her entire adult life. She knew how they operated. They offered peace while sharpening their swords. They spoke of friendship while calculating the value of your treasury. Every kind word was a trap. Every promise was a lie wrapped in silk. "If Caesar wishes to negotiate," she called down, "he can come himself. I will not open these doors for anyone less." Silence. Then Proculeius's voice again, still pleasant. "That can be arranged. Caesar is most eager to meet you. Perhaps we could continue this conversation more comfortably. Through the gap in the wall, perhaps." There was a narrow crack where 2 stones had shifted over the years, wide enough for voices to pass through. Cleopatra descended the stairs slowly, keeping her eyes on the doors. When she reached the crack, she could see a sliver of the courtyard outside. Roman soldiers everywhere, hundreds of them. The red of their cloaks filled her vision like a wound. "I am listening," she said. "Caesar admires you greatly. He has heard of your intelligence, your courage, your political skill. He has no wish to harm you or your children. All he asks is a peaceful transition. Egypt will become part of the Roman world, as it was always destined to be. You will be treated with dignity appropriate to your station. Dignity. The word tasted like poison in her mouth. And if I refuse, why would you refuse? You have lost, Your Majesty. Your army has surrendered. Your fleet has been captured. Your allies have abandoned you. Mark Antony is dead. What is there left to fight for? My children. They are safe. They will remain safe, as long as you cooperate. There it was. The threat beneath the kindness. Cooperate, or your children suffer. She had heard variations of this threat 100 times in her life. From her father's advisors, from her brother's supporters, from every man who had ever tried to control her. It never got easier to hear. I want to see them. That can be arranged, in time, once we have established mutual trust. While Proculaeus talked, Cleopatra noticed movement at the edge of her vision. Shadows shifting on the upper wall. Something climbing. She kept her face still, kept her voice steady, but her heart began to pound. Mutual trust takes time, she said, stretching out the conversation. Perhaps we could begin with... The crash came from above, the sound of the window being forced open. Heavy bodies dropping onto the stone floor where Antony had died just minutes before. Cleopatra ran for the stairs, but she was too slow. Roman soldiers poured down from the upper level, their swords drawn, their faces set. They had climbed the outer wall while Proculaeus kept her talking. They had entered through the same opening she had used to save Antony's life. The irony was perfect. The cruelty was deliberate. Octavian had planned this moment down to the last detail. She pulled the dagger from her belt. The blade caught the torchlight as she raised it toward her own chest. One thrust. That was all she needed. One thrust and Octavian would lose his prize. One thrust and she would join Antony in whatever darkness waited beyond death. But the soldiers were faster. A hand clamped around her wrist and twisted. The dagger clattered to the floor. Another soldier grabbed her other arm. A third seized her around the waist, lifting her off her feet. She kicked, she bit, she screamed curses in 3 languages. None of it mattered. "Do not let her die," someone shouted. "Caesar's orders. She must be kept alive." They pinned her against the wall, searched her clothing with rough, efficient hands, found the second blade strapped to her thigh, found the small vial of poison hidden in her hair, took everything. Cleopatra stopped struggling. There was no point. They had her. They had won. Proculaeus appeared in the doorway, stepping over the bar that had kept the Romans out for so long. His pleasant expression had not changed. "Please, Your Majesty, there's no need for this. Caesar truly does wish you well." She spat at his feet. "Take her to the palace," Proculaeus said, unmoved. "Second floor. The room with the narrow window. Guard her at all times. Search her twice daily. Nothing sharp. Nothing she can use to harm herself." As the soldiers dragged her from the tomb, Cleopatra looked back one last time. Antony's body lay where it had fallen, ignored by the Romans hurrying past. Iris and Charmian were being restrained by other soldiers, their faces pale with fear. This was how it ended. Not with dignity, not with choice, but with rough hands and shouted orders and the systematic removal of every option she had left. Almost every option. Deep in her mind, in the place where her survival instinct lived, Cleopatra began to plan. They had taken her weapons. They had taken her poison. They would take everything they could find. But they did not know about the tomb. They did not know what she had hidden in the walls during those desperate hours before the Romans broke through. They did not know that she had planned for this possibility years ago. She just needed to survive long enough to use it. The door closed behind her with a sound like a tomb ceiling. Cleopatra stood in the center of the room and forced herself to breathe. The space was small, perhaps 15 paces across, stone walls bare of decoration, stone floor cold beneath her feet, a single wooden bench along one wall, a narrow window high up, too small for anything except light and air. This had been a servant's quarters once. She remembered walking past this door thousands of times on her way to the throne room, the banquet hall, the private chambers where she had made love and made war and made history. Now it was her prison, her entire world reduced to 4 walls and a window she could not reach. The first night was the hardest. She had nothing. No blankets against the cold. No food to ease her hunger. No water to clean Antony's blood from her skin. She sat on the wooden bench with her back against the stone and listened to the sounds of her conquered palace. Roman voices everywhere, shouting orders in Latin, boots marching through corridors that had only ever known the soft steps of Egyptian servants, the crash of furniture being moved, the clink of treasure being catalogued, the systematic dismantling of everything she had built, and beneath it all, another sound, one that made her press her hands against her ears and rock back and forth like a child, her children crying. She could hear Ptolemy, his high, frightened wail carried through the stone from somewhere in the east wing, calling for his mother, over and over. "Mama, Mama, where are you? I want my mama." Cleopatra did not cry. She had learned long ago that tears were a luxury she could not afford. But something inside her cracked open and began to bleed. A wound deeper than any sword could make. The wound of a mother who cannot reach her child. Morning came gray and cold through the narrow window. The door opened. A Roman woman entered with a bowl of water and a plain white dress. "Clean yourself," the woman said. Her Greek was accented but understandable. "You have visitors today. Where are my children?" The woman's face did not change. "Clean yourself. Eat what we bring you. Do as you're told. That is how you help your children." She left. The bolt slid home. Cleopatra was alone again, but not for long. Within an hour, the door opened again. 3 men entered. They were not soldiers. They carried measuring ropes and wax tablets and wooden rods marked with increments. Architects. "Arms out, please," one of them said. Cleopatra did not move. "What is this?" "Standard procedure. For the triumph." The word hit her like a physical blow. Triumph. She knew what Roman triumphs involved. She had been in Rome during Caesar's Gallic triumph. She had watched from a balcony as Vercingetorix, the proud king of the Gauls, was dragged through the streets in chains. The crowd had jeered. They had thrown rotten fruit. And at the end of the parade, in the darkness of the Tullianum prison, Vercingetorix had been strangled to death. That was what waited for her. That was what Octavian was planning. A spectacle of humiliation, a public degradation of everything she had been. And these men with their measuring ropes were building the stage. "Arms out," the architect repeated. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way. Your choice." She thought about fighting, about refusing, about making them force her. Then she thought about Ptolemy's crying, about the Roman woman's words. "Do as you're told. That is how you help your children." Slowly, hating herself for every inch, Cleopatra raised her arms. They measured everything, the span from fingertip to fingertip, the width of her shoulders, the circumference of her neck where the chains would rest. They noted the length of her legs, the size of her feet, the distance from shoulder to wrist. They discussed her in the third person, as if she were not there. "The platform will need to be elevated, 4 feet at least. Standard triumph height, good visibility from the back of the crowd. She's taller than I expected. The chains will need to be longer. What about the regalia? Caesar wants her recognizable. We'll need to source authentic Egyptian materials, the headdress, the symbols. She should look like a queen, a defeated queen, but still a queen. They measured her for 2 hours, every inch of her body catalogued and recorded, every dimension calculated for maximum humiliation. And through it all, Cleopatra stood with her arms raised and said nothing. When they finally left, she collapsed onto the wooden bench. Her arms ached from holding them up. Her dignity ached from something much deeper. They were going to parade her through Rome. They were going to drag her through streets lined with screaming Romans. They were going to strip away everything she had ever been and reduce her to a symbol of their victory. Unless she found another way. The vial. The one she had hidden in the tomb, years ago, behind a loose stone near Antony's final resting place. Poison strong enough to kill 3 people in minutes. Her insurance policy against exactly this moment. If she could get to the tomb. If they would let her make offerings to Antony's memory. If she could retrieve what she had hidden. It was a small hope. A fragile hope. But it was all she had left. On the 4th day, they brought news of her children. Cleopatra was sitting on the wooden bench when the door opened. She had learned to conserve her energy, to move as little as possible, to keep her mind sharp while her body rested. The food they brought was adequate but bland. The water was clean. They wanted her healthy for the triumph. The man who entered was different from the others. Younger, softer. He had the look of a poet rather than a soldier, with delicate features and intelligent eyes. When he spoke, his voice was gentle, almost kind. Your Majesty, my name is Gaius Cornelius Gallus. I bring greetings from Caesar. Where are my children? Gallus smiled. It was a beautiful smile, the kind that probably opened many doors in Roman society. Directly to business, I admire that. Your children are well. They are housed in the East Wing, under the care of Caesar's own servants. They want for nothing. I want to see them. Of course you do. Any mother would. He settled himself against the wall, casual and relaxed, as if this were a social call. That can be arranged. In time. Once certain matters are resolved. What matters? The terms of your cooperation, primarily. The details of the triumph. The future of your family. He ticked off each item on his fingers. Simple things, really. But they must be settled before any reunions can take place. Cleopatra studied his face, looking for the lie beneath the charm, finding nothing but smooth, diplomatic blankness. Tell me plainly, she said. What does Octavian want? Gallus's smile widened slightly. Caesar wishes only for peace, for an orderly transition. Egypt will become Roman, as it was always meant to be. The wealth of your kingdom will flow to Rome. Your army will serve Roman commanders. Your people will pay Roman taxes. These things are inevitable. And me? You will participate in Caesar's triumph. You will walk through the streets of Rome, demonstrating that the wars are over, that the East is pacified, that former enemies can coexist in the new order. Walk through the streets in chains. The specifics are still being discussed. Caesar is not unreasonable. With full cooperation, certain dignities might be preserved. And after the triumph? Retirement. A comfortable villa outside Rome. A quiet life, away from politics. Your younger children will be raised in the household of Caesar's sister. They will receive excellent educations. They will marry into Roman families. They will have futures. Cleopatra noticed what he had not said. You mentioned my younger children. What about Caesarion? Something flickered behind Gallus's eyes. Just for a moment. Then the diplomatic mask returned. Caesarion presents certain complications. His parentage makes him politically sensitive. His parentage? You mean the fact that he is Julius Caesar's son? The only surviving biological son of the divine Julius, yes. That creates difficulties. But difficulties can be overcome, with sufficient cooperation. There it was, the threat, wrapped in silk, perfumed with kindness, but unmistakable. Cooperate, or your son dies. Cleopatra felt the walls pressing closer. Every conversation was a negotiation. Every word was a reminder that she had nothing to bargain with except her own submission. They had her children. They had her kingdom. They had everything except her body walking through the streets of Rome. And they would have that too, unless she found another way. I need time, she said, to consider your offer. Of course, Caesar is patient, but the ships leave for Rome in 6 days. Decisions must be made before then. Gallus stood. He moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. Caesar has heard that you wish to visit Antony's tomb, to make offerings in his memory. Cleopatra's heart skipped. That is correct. The request has been approved. Tomorrow. Under guard, of course, but approved. He left. The bolt slid home, and Cleopatra sat very still in the empty room, feeling something she had not felt in days. Hope. They were letting her visit the tomb, the place where she had hidden the vial, the insurance policy she had prepared years ago, against exactly this moment. Tomorrow, she would retrieve it. Tomorrow, she would take back control. The only question was how to use it. Drink it now, and her children would be left alone. Octavian might show them mercy, or he might not. There were no guarantees either way. But wait too long, and they might discover the vial, might take it from her, might remove her last option. She had 6 days to decide. 6 days to weigh her dignity against her children's lives. 6 days to choose between the quick death she wanted and the slow humiliation they planned. That night, for the first time since her capture, Cleopatra dreamed. She dreamed of Caesarion as a baby, sleeping in her arms. She dreamed of the twins taking their first steps, laughing as they tumbled into her embrace. She dreamed of little Ptolemy calling her name in the darkness. Mama, Mama, where are you? She woke with tears on her face. The first tears she had shed since Antony died, and she still did not know what to choose. The morning of the 5th day was bright and cruel.